On the 13th of March, 2019, a police officer in Athens, Georgia, takes a burglary report. The caller is a local man in his late 20s. He has asked for help. He told 9/11 that someone got into his house and took hundreds of thousands of dollars in cryptocurrency. The number he gives is true. It is also the smallest true number in that building. Down the hall from where that officer is standing, there is a bathroom closet. In the closet, there is a popcorn tin. Under a folded blanket inside the tin, there is a single-board computer about the size of a paperback. On it sit 50,000 Bitcoin. They were taken from the largest drug market the internet has ever run. Nobody in the house says so. Nobody in the house has to. The man reporting the theft cannot describe most of what he owns, because describing it would mean explaining where it came from. So he reports the part he is willing to explain, and he lets the rest stay in the closet. The officer writes down what he is given. There is no reason not to. A man has been robbed. The man is cooperative, and the stolen property is the kind most police departments in 2019 had no procedure for recovering. The report goes into a file. The file goes nowhere for 2 years, and when it finally moves, it will not be the burglary that moves it. To understand what that officer was standing next to, you have to know what Athens thought Jimmy Zhong was. He was local. He had studied computer science at the University of Georgia. He was in his early 30s. He had a lake house. He had money nobody could quite account for, and nobody asked very hard about it. He was generous with it, in the specific way that lonely people are generous. He threw parties. He flew people to football games. He handed out cash to friends and near strangers and people who were neither. According to CNBC's reporting, his own private investigator put it plainly. He wanted to be liked. None of that is a crime. Plenty of people in a college town have money from somewhere unglamorous, a family business, an early stock option, a piece of property. Athens had no reason to look closer, and for 9 years nobody did. Here is what makes this case worth an hour of anyone's attention. Zhong was not hiding from a manhunt. There was no manhunt. For most of that decade, no investigator anywhere was looking for him, because no investigator anywhere knew there was a him to look for. What existed instead was a gap, a hole in a ledger, 10 years old, with no name attached. And I want to be precise about the shape of that hole, because the shape is the whole case. When I look at a file like this one, I am not looking for a genius. I am looking for the one moment a person had to touch the ordinary world, a bank, an exchange, a form with their name on it. That moment is where every one of these ends. Zhong's moment was still 2 years away from the officer with the clipboard. Start in 2012 with a website. Silk Road was a dark web marketplace that ran essentially on trust and Bitcoin. You deposited coin into an account on the site. You spent it. What was left, you withdrew. That is the entire system you need to understand, and the flaw lives in the last word. Here is the first piece. When a user asked to withdraw, Silk Road software had to do 2 separate things. Send the coin out, then write down that it had sent the coin out. Those 2 jobs were not welded together. There was a gap between them, small, fractions of a second. Second piece. In that gap, the site still believed the money was there. Ask again inside that gap, and it would answer the same way it had a moment earlier. It had not yet finished updating its own memory. Third piece, and this is the one that matters. Nothing stopped you asking more than once. In the trade, that pattern has a name. It is a race condition. 2 instructions racing, and the outcome depending on which one lands first. It is a category of software defect, not a hacking technique. I can describe it to you at all only because the platform it lived on has been dead for over a decade. Silk Road was seized in 2013. There is nothing here for anyone to go and try. So, what does that look like from the outside? The Justice Department gives us one worked example, and it is worth sitting with. On the 19th of September, 2012, Zhong deposited 500 Bitcoin into a Silk Road wallet. Less than 5 seconds later, he executed 5 withdrawals of 500 Bitcoin each, according to prosecutors, within the same second. He put in 500. He took out 2,500. Net gain on one deposit in under 5 seconds, 2,000 Bitcoin. Then he did it again. Prosecutors say he created approximately 9 Silk Road accounts to run it through and triggered more than 140 transactions in rapid succession. By the time he stopped, roughly 50,000 Bitcoin had left Silk Road and did not come back. Now, I want you to notice what has and has not happened here. He has not broken any encryption. He has not stolen a password. He has clicked a button faster than a website could finish thinking, and he has done it 140 times. At September 2012 prices, 50,000 Bitcoin was worth something in the region of $600,000. Real money, not life-changing money. And notice who he stole it from. Silk Road was a marketplace for narcotics and false documents. Its customers could not go to the police. Its operators could not go to the police. Zhong had found the one large pile of money on earth, whose owners had no lawful way to complain about losing it. That is not a small detail. It is the reason the theft went unreported for years, not undetected, unreported. Silk Road knew. Silk Road could do nothing. And then Jimmy Zhong did the thing that separates this case from every other one on this channel. Nothing. He did nothing. Not for a year, not for 5. No mixer at scale, no fleet of cars, no shell business to run it through and draw it back out as revenue. He sat on it while the price went from $12 to $20,000 and back and up again. Think about what that requires. In 2013, that pile was worth a few million, and Silk Road was being seized around him. In 2017, it crossed $1 billion. He watched it cross $1 billion, and he did not touch it. Most people cannot hold a secret that large without spending some of it, and spending is how we find them. A car, a house, a wire to a relative. The money has to become something, and the moment it becomes something, it has to pass through an institution that writes things down. In 2017, the Bitcoin Cash hard fork handed him a second pile for free. Prosecutors put those proceeds at roughly 3,500 additional Bitcoin. That took his total to about 53,500. He still did nothing. Understand what that means in my world. Almost every scheme I have ever read a file on dies at the cash out. Placement, layering, integration, get the money in, move it around, bring it back looking clean. That is the textbook, and the textbook exists because that is where people get caught. Zhong skipped the textbook entirely by refusing to cash out at all. For 9 years he was, on paper, the single hardest financial crime target imaginable, a man with no transactions. Which brings us back to a house in Georgia and a man on the phone to 911. In March 2019, somebody robbed him. We do not know who. That is not a dramatic pause. It is the state of the record. The person who broke into Jimmy Zhong's house and took a portion of his cryptocurrency has never been identified and was never caught. And Zhong, sitting on the largest unclaimed pile of stolen Bitcoin in the world, did the most ordinary thing a burgled man can do. He called the police. Now, every account of this case you will find says that phone call is what caught him. I want to be careful here because the record does not support that, and the difference matters. The burglary report went nowhere. Athens, Clark County had a theft of cryptocurrency from a man with no criminal history, with no suspect and no recoverable asset. It sat. What actually caught Jimmy Zhong happened in a different building, on a different question. It happened because of something he did in 2019 that had nothing to do with the burglary. He sold 118 Bitcoin. That is it. That is the entire fatal flaw. After 9 years of touching nothing, he logged into an account at a digital currency broker. He sold approximately 118 Bitcoin out of 53,000, roughly 0.2% of what he was holding. And according to the affidavit filed by IRS Criminal Investigations Special Agent Trevor McLennan, he logged into that account from his own IP address, not a mixer, not a chain of shell wallets, his own connection from his own house, into an exchange that, like every regulated exchange, had asked him for identification when he opened the account. If you have watched this channel for any length of time, you know the line coming. You also know I do not say it for effect. The ledger is permanent. Bitcoin's entire design is a public, immutable record of every transaction that has ever occurred. It does not forget, it does not expire, and it does not care that 9 years have passed. Zhong understood that perfectly for 9 years. He understood it right up until he wanted 118 coins worth of money. If this is the kind of thing you want more of, the actual mechanism sourced, without the guesswork, subscribe. It genuinely helps, because now the trail has a name on it. And in Athens, a detective is about to get a phone call about a burglary he had long since stopped thinking about. Here is how a 10-year-old hole in a ledger becomes a name on a warrant. Blockchain analysis firms do a specific, unglamorous job. They label addresses. Over years, they build a map of which address clusters belong to which entities. This exchange, that marketplace, this ransomware group. All of it inferred from watching how coin moves between them. Million. Silk Road's stolen 50,000 had been sitting on that map, labeled and dormant, for the better part of a decade, unspendable in practice, because everyone was watching. Million. And this is where crypto inverts the ordinary problem. In conventional laundering, time is the launderer's friend. Records get destroyed on retention schedules. Institutions merge and lose their archives. Witnesses forget. Wait long enough and the trail genuinely degrades. On a blockchain, nothing degrades. The 2012 transactions were exactly as readable in 2021 as they had been the week they happened. Waiting did not weaken the evidence against Jimmy Zhong. It only meant nobody had yet had a reason to look at his particular corner of it. The moment a portion of it moved to a regulated exchange, two facts collided. The blockchain said where the coin had come from. The exchange said who had opened the account. Chainalysis, working with IRS criminal investigation, followed the first fact. The exchange's compliance function supplied the second. That is the whole trick. There is no third step, and I want to give the compliance side its due here, because it almost never gets any. Somewhere in that exchange, a team ran a routine identity check on a routine account, filed it, and moved on. They did not know what they had. 9 years of the best operational discipline I have seen in a file was undone by a form somebody filled in correctly. Which is when IRS CI drove to Athens. Lieutenant Jody Thompson had taken a burglary report 2 years earlier. He described the moment to CNBC. A call came in from a federal agent, and the agent asked whether he could come by and speak to him about Jimmy. Understand the position that puts him in. The stalled case on his desk was not a small case that turned out to be big. It was the smaller half of something enormous, a theft from a man who was himself holding the proceeds of the second largest cryptocurrency crime in American history. The two investigations then ran as one. Investigators worked the burglary, a real, unsolved crime, while building the federal case underneath it. Missile. I want to be careful about the sequence, because it is the part every other telling of this case gets backwards. The 911 call did not identify Jimmy Zhong. The blockchain did. The call had, by that point, been sitting unresolved for 2 years. What the burglary gave investigators was not a lead. It was a door, a legitimate, already open reason to be in contact with a man they had already found by other means. On the 9th of November, 2021, agents executed a judicially authorized search warrant at Zhong's home in Gainesville, Georgia. They found an underground floor safe, and in a bathroom closet, they found a popcorn tin. Inside it, under blankets, was a single-board computer. On that computer, and in that safe, sat 50,491 Bitcoin. Also in the house, $661,900 in cash. Precious metals. 25 Cassasius coins, physical Bitcoin, minted early, from an era when the idea still needed a physical object to make sense to people. U.S. Attorney Damian Williams put it in the press release, and I will admit it is a good line. For almost 10 years, he said, the whereabouts of this Bitcoin had ballooned into an over $3.3 billion mystery. We won't stop following the money, even to a circuit board in the bottom of a popcorn tin. On the 4th of November, 2022, James Zhong pleaded guilty to 1 count of wire fraud. On the 14th of April, 2023, District Judge Paul Gardefee sentenced him. 1 year and 1 day. The government obtained final forfeiture orders covering 51,680 Bitcoin, valued at over $3.4 billion at the time of seizure. The case was worked by IRS Criminal Investigations Western Cybercrimes Unit out of the Los Angeles field office. It was prosecuted by Assistant U.S. Attorney David Felton with support from the Athens Clark County Police Department. 1 year and 1 day is worth sitting with, because there is a comparison sitting right next to it. Ross Ulbricht built Silk Road. He was convicted in 2015 and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Jimmy Zhong stole 50,000 Bitcoin from that same marketplace and served roughly 12 months. I am not going to tell you what that gap ought to be, but the mechanism behind it is worth naming because it is not arbitrary. Ulbricht was convicted of running a criminal enterprise, the drugs, the scale, the whole architecture. Zhong pleaded to 1 count of wire fraud against a website, and he handed back the money. The extra day matters too, incidentally. A year and a day makes a federal prisoner eligible for good conduct credit. A flat 12 months does not. It is a small, deliberate piece of courtroom arithmetic, which brings us back to Lieutenant Thompson's file. The burglary was never solved. The person who broke into that house in March 2019 has not been identified, has not been charged. As far as the public record goes, was never found. So the report that officer took in 2019 closes exactly where it opened, unsolved. It just happened to be sitting on top of $3.5 billion. And I said at the start that the number Zhong gave the police was the smallest true number in that building. It was. He reported hundreds of thousands. The house held over $3 billion. He could only report the part he was willing to explain, and that was the part he had actually lost. The rest he kept for 2 more years. So what does this case teach detection? 2 things, and the second one is the one I would write on the wall. The first is that patience beats laundering. Zhong's 9 years of doing nothing defeated every conventional AML control we have, because every one of them is built to watch money move. Money that sits still is money nothing is looking at. The second is that it does not matter, because the ledger does not expire. 9 years of perfect discipline and 1 login from a home IP address are not weighted differently by a blockchain. It kept the 2012 transactions exactly as legible as the 2019 one, and it will keep them that way indefinitely. Every scheme built on crypto is a bet that nobody will ever be looking when you finally need the money to be yours. Zhong held that bet for 9 years. He lost it over 118 coins. And there is a third thing here, quieter than the other 2, which is about who actually closes cases like this one. Not a task force, not a raid. A compliance team ran an identity check they run thousands of times a day on an account that looked like nothing. They filed it correctly. An analyst somewhere labeled a cluster of addresses years before anyone needed the label. A patrol officer in Athens wrote down a burglary report that appeared to go nowhere. None of them knew what they had. Every one of them did their job properly anyway, and the case was assembled out of their paperwork nearly a decade later. That is what detection actually looks like. It is not clever, it is durable. If you got something out of this, hit like and subscribe. It is the most useful thing you can do for a channel that works from court documents. Case closed. Follow the money.